A lot of Phillies news to dive into the mailbag here with Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. He's got the Phillies mailbag, a lot of other news and notes. Frank, before we dive into that mailbag, let's get your take on this Phillies Marlins stuff. I mean, it's been about 3-4 weeks now that we've been hearing the whispers, a lot of smoke. Do you think there's going to be legitimate fire between these two teams?
Well, in a lot of ways, I think the Phillies and Marlins connecting make a lot of sense. Essentially, you've got two teams on the opposite end of the spectrum. You know, you've got the Marlins, who essentially want to dump as much payroll as they can, and the Phillies, who have as much room for they could take on millions and millions and millions of dollars. You know, so basically, they could essentially assume the Marlins' entire payroll would still be fine. So what's happening basically is you have a Marlins owner who wants to sell the team. And before he closes on the sale, he wants to put as much money into his pocket as he possibly can. So the Phillies are trying to capitalize on that, saying, hey, listen, we'll take your payroll. Just send us some good players along with it. So I could easily see those two teams being in dialogue with one another.
So of the deal, a lot of it is interesting because some of the names in there, obviously Stanton, he's a huge name. Yelich is a name that might be under the radar, but might be maybe the most complete player. Dee Gordon's name has come up, and some people had said, all right, why would Dee Gordon fit? You know, he's a second baseman here. So give us a little insight on why those are the names the Phillies could target.
Well, Stanton is the obvious one in that he's got the biggest salary annually of pretty much any outfielder or offensive player in the game. Now, we know that'll change once Bryce Harper and Manny Machado make it to free agency, but he's got that huge contract. The way the Marlins set it up, it was so backloaded that you kind of wonder if all along the owner, Jeffrey Loria, actually planned to get rid of the team before he'd ever have to pay it. So his salary is about to kick in. You kind of expect that the Marlins aren't going to want to keep it, but kind of the issue there is, will they sell on Stanton before they have new ownership? And that might be a name that they just can't do a sale of the team without. But in terms of Dee Gordon, now Gordon is still very much a valuable player. Yes, he's a second baseman. Now, I think the thing that the fans should remember here is you probably would send Cesar Hernandez away in that deal if that's what happens. And I would caution people of considering prospects as already in the Phillies lineup already. So you might say, well, Scott Kingery's a second baseman. Well, you know, you can't do your lineup now based on what he might be. So, and I think there's still opportunities for him to change positions down the line. But in this situation, if taking on Dee Gordon means taking on all that money, which they can do easily, and it also means you get another player like outfielder Christian Yelich, well, then you've upgraded two positions. You know, I do think Gordon gives you much more than Hernandez in that Dee Gordon steals a lot of bases. One thing the Phillies are not doing right now is stealing a lot of bases. And he's got that great speed, so he is kind of an upgrade over Hernandez in my opinion, and I think the numbers definitely support that. So, you know what, if they can upgrade second base a little bit and at the same time add somebody like Yelich, I think they're willing to do that, because if you look at the money that Gordon's going to make, that might be a good contract for the Phillies to take on from the Marlins who want to dump money. He makes he'll be due, if his option vests, he'll be due another $51 million or so through 2021, I believe. And that's something the Phillies could easily take on.
Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com, looking in the mailbag. Before we dive into some of the mailbag questions, I asked Pete and the listeners this question, Frank. Which prospects are you unwilling to part with? Is there anybody in the system you're unwilling to include in a trade?
Right now, no. I think the Phillies should do whatever they can.
That's Crawford, that's Kingery, all of them.
I don't think there's anybody that's off the table right now. Now, I actually made this note in the mailbag too, but we can certainly cover it now. But remember in 2009, Dominic Brown, you can't trade him. He is the untouchable. Well, I kind of want Halladay, but no, I will not trade Dominic Brown. And the Phillies actually kind of said that to the Blue Jays. Now, ultimately, they did end up with Halladay, but imagine if that would have been the reason the Phillies never added Halladay. You'd kind of feel pretty foolish right now, wouldn't you?
The woulda, coulda, shoulda game with Frank Klose. And yes, the mailbag is open, Frank. And what's it going to take? What's the plan to get Eichhoff back to last year? Is it possible? The minors? I mean, he might have been their most consistent guy last year. This year has certainly been a struggle for him, and I know that because I happen to be lucky enough to see his one win when he beat the Padres. So, I mean, Ron L. wants to know, how do we fix Eichhoff?
Well, in my opinion, it's not to send him down to the minor leagues. I think it's just to let him pitch. Now, we really don't know to what extent that little upper back strain that put him on the disabled list was affecting his pitching. You probably would imagine if you have that issue, it's not going to be easy for you. But I think right now it's still a matter of mechanics that they're trying to iron out. And honestly, the Phillies don't plan to make the playoffs this year. It's not like Jared Eichhoff is going to make or break their playoff run. So I think in this situation, you just need to let him pitch. And I think he's got the talent. I think he's still a very promising young arm, very smart pitcher, really knows what he's doing on the mound. If he can get those mechanics ironed out and get himself back on track, again, he has the ability, I believe, to be a very, very solid pitcher in the middle of a good starting rotation. So I would not overreact and send him to the minors. I would let him just go out there for the rest of the season, try to iron it out as he goes. Maybe there's some mistakes along the way. Maybe Giancarlo Stanton hits a couple of homers another game too. But you got to just let him pitch. And really, the Phillies might move somebody like Jeremy Hellickson in the next couple of weeks. So they need him up there anyway, pitching. So you might as well let him iron it out in the majors. And just one thing I want to point out too, how many people have said, well, bring all the prospects up. Let's see what they can do. Well, don't we need to see what the players on the roster already can do?
Frank Klose is with us. The Phillies mailbag is open. While we're talking about prospects, is it time to stop thinking of J.P. Crawford as a prospect? Emil wants to know that.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I saved this question from last week because we ran out of time. And in the last week, he's had a very, very good week. In fact, he has 7 hits in his last 19 at-bats. And if you look at his entire month of July, he's actually putting up some very, very good numbers that not put up just yet. So if you look at his line for the month of July, he's hitting .308. He's got 6 home runs, 2 doubles, 2 triples, and all that helps amount to a 1.169 OPS. Now, this is just the month of July, okay? So now we don't want to draw too many big conclusions from that, but certainly that's where you want him trending. A year ago, he got a kind of a suspect promotion from AA Reading to AAA Lehigh Valley. And even at the time, I didn't think he was ready for that jump. So maybe having been set back a little bit from that jump, he's finally kind of getting hold of AAA and starting to feel comfortable. And one little tidbit, you noticed about, I think it was just over a week ago, Baseball America listed their top 100 prospects, and J.P. Crawford was bumped all the way down to 92. Now, this is a guy who was in their top 10, okay? So, on a regular basis. So now that he's all the way down to 92, J.P. Crawford actually took to Twitter and he made a comment, which I wonder if is directly linked to that Baseball America article, but all it is motivation. And you know what? He just fired off at 7 for 19 afterwards. So who knows? Maybe he's the type of player that kind of gets a little presumptuous, like fans sometimes get presumptuous about the future. And, maybe he needed that. And, he seems to be a man on a mission right now. And if he continues this path, then you might see him in September.
Any pitchers in that system that who right now, who's the top pitcher in that system that you're intrigued by?
Well, I guess it would be Tom Eshelman. I mean, he went from AA to AAA very early in the season and just basically took hold of that Iron Pigs rotation. He started the International League All-Star game this past week, and I think he's somebody that's really turned some heads. Now, it's kind of funny because you look at the top 30 prospect list, and Eshelman is not on it. He was sort of that last piece that came over in the Ken Giles trade, and he's really, really blossomed. And we also have to mention, and you might have noticed yesterday I posted something on Nick Fonte, who is at Class A Lakewood. He just pitched a 9-inning no-hitter after taking part earlier in the season in a combined no-hitter. So that was a 31st round draft pick in 2015. Now, most of the time, those 31st draft picks don't sign. they just kind of go off to college and you never hear about them until they've played a few years. But Phillies got him to sign, and he's certainly impressing at the lower levels. So names like that, you're going to start to get more and more attention. And Sixto Sanchez, who came in, I think, at 46 on the Baseball America list, he might be the top arm in the organization that we're probably going to see develop in the next few years.
We're getting closer to that trade deadline. Obviously, the Phillies and Marlins, they're two names that have come up a lot, but the Phillies do have some candidates. I guess Joseph Neshek's name came up today. Saw a tweet from Ken Rosenthal with that. So I would anticipate that the Phillies at least do something minor at the very least.
Yeah, I think Neshek is as good as gone. But I do caution the Phillies this. There seem to be a lot of relievers out there that are available. And if the Phillies hold off too long and try to get too high a return, they might miss out altogether. So there seem to be plenty of teams that could use somebody like Neshek. You could talk about the Yankees, the Brewers, the Red Sox, the Rays, all of whom have been linked to Neshek in recent days. But you know what? Those teams are also in on other relievers like David Phelps, who Phillies gave a little trouble to last night, who's on the Marlins, and Brad Hand is getting a lot of attention. He pitches for the San Diego Padres. So I think if the Phillies strike sooner than later, you already saw the Nationals grab Brian Madsen and Sean Doolittle. So the teams aren't waiting around, and you know what? If the Phillies wait too long, maybe they missed out. But I think Hellickson could be moved. Hellickson might fit in a couple places, I believe, and the Phillies can eat that money. So I think too the Phillies want to space for their young pitchers like Ben Lively and Nick Pivetta. So I think Hellickson moves, and if they can find a taker for Joseph, there don't seem to be very many out there that could use somebody like Joseph right now, but that might be an off-season trade.
All right, Frank Klose, at Frank Klose with a K on Twitter, and, of course, the Phillies Mailbag every Tuesday right here. He'll be back with Rich Q during Middays with Q on Thursday show for more Phillies talk here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Take care, Frank.
You too, guys.